On May 25, 2020, the streets of Minneapolis became the center of a tragedy that would shake the entire world. George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, lost his life in an encounter with police that was captured on video and spread across the globe within hours. What followed was not just the trial of Derek Chauvin, the police officer charged in his death, but one of the most important legal and social reckonings in modern U.S. history. This is the full story of the George Floyd case and the trial that defined it. George Floyd was born in North Carolina and grew up in Houston, Texas. Friends described him as a gentle giant, standing over 6 feet tall, and someone who had struggled but was trying to turn his life around. In 2014, he moved to Minneapolis for a fresh start, working as a security guard and truck driver. Like millions of others, Floyd had his ups and downs, but by 2020, he was living quietly in the community. On the evening of May 25, 2020, everything changed. A store clerk at Cup Foods in Minneapolis called the police, reporting that Floyd had used a counterfeit $20 bill to buy cigarettes. When officers arrived, including Derek Chauvin, a 19-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department, they confronted Floyd outside. What began as a routine arrest escalated quickly. Within minutes, Floyd was pinned to the ground, handcuffed, with Chauvin's knee pressing into his neck. For 9 minutes and 29 seconds, bystanders filmed as Floyd repeatedly gasped, "I can't breathe." Those words would echo around the world. The video taken by a teenager, Darnella Frazier, showed every agonizing moment. Floyd calling for his mother, the bystanders pleading with officers to stop, and Chauvin, expressionless, keeping his knee on Floyd's neck even after Floyd had gone silent. That footage sparked outrage. Within hours, the video spread across social media, igniting protests not only in Minneapolis, but in cities across the United States and eventually across the world. The reaction was immediate and massive. Protests erupted in all 50 states, demanding justice for George Floyd and calling for an end to police brutality and systemic racism. In cities from New York to Los Angeles, London to Berlin, millions marched with signs reading "Black Lives Matter" and "Justice for George." The streets filled with anger, grief, and a collective demand for change. It was the largest protest movement in American history since the Civil Rights era. Meanwhile, Minneapolis city officials moved quickly. Derek Chauvin was fired from the police force the next day. Soon after, he was arrested and charged with second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. 3 other officers at the scene, J. Alexander Quang, Thomas Lane, and Tu Tao, were also fired and later charged with aiding and abetting. For many, it was a rare moment of accountability, but the trial ahead would test the legal system like never before. The trial of Derek Chauvin began on March 29, 2021, in Hennepin County, Minnesota. The eyes of the world were on that courtroom. Security was tight, with barriers around the courthouse and National Guard troops stationed nearby, as authorities prepared for potential unrest. Inside, Judge Peter Cahill presided over a trial unlike any other in recent memory. The prosecution, led by Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison's team, argued that Chauvin's actions directly caused George Floyd's death. They presented the bystander video again and again, telling the jury, "You can believe your eyes. It's murder." The prosecution called 38 witnesses, including medical experts, police trainers, and bystanders who had watched Floyd's final moments. One of the most emotional testimonies came from Darnella Frazier, the teenager who filmed the video. She described feeling helpless as she watched Floyd die, saying, "It wasn't right. He was suffering." Other bystanders, including an off-duty firefighter, testified that they had begged the officers to check Floyd's pulse, but their pleas were ignored. Medical experts played a crucial role in the case. Dr. Martin Tobin, a renowned pulmonologist, explained to the jury exactly how Floyd died, using diagrams and even asking jurors to touch their own necks to understand. He testified that Floyd died of oxygen deprivation caused by Chauvin's knee on his neck and back. The medical examiner also ruled Floyd's death a homicide. The defense, led by attorney Eric Nelson, argued that Floyd's death was not caused solely by Chauvin's actions. They pointed to Floyd's underlying health conditions, including heart disease, and the presence of drugs in his system. Nelson suggested that Chauvin had acted as any reasonable officer would under the circumstances. The defense also tried to argue that the crowd of bystanders was a threat that distracted Chauvin from properly assessing Floyd's condition. But the prosecution countered effectively. They brought in senior police officers, including Minneapolis Police Chief Medaria Arredondo, who testified against Chauvin. Arredondo told the jury that Chauvin's actions were not part of police training and that once Floyd was no longer resisting, the use of force should have ended. His testimony was powerful because it showed that Chauvin had not only broken the law, but had also violated his duty as a police officer. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. On April 19, 2021, the jury began deliberations. The world waited. Security forces stood ready across the nation in case of unrest. People gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs and chanting George Floyd's name. On April 20th, 2021, the verdict was announced. The jury found Derek Chauvin guilty on all 3 counts: second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The moment the verdict was read, the courtroom fell silent. Chauvin sat expressionless as the judge confirmed the jury's decision. Outside, crowds erupted in cheers, chanting "Justice" and "George Floyd." For many, it was a historic moment of accountability in a country where police officers are rarely convicted for on-duty killings. Weeks later, Chauvin was sentenced to 22.5 years in prison. The sentence was one of the longest ever given to a police officer for unlawful use of deadly force. Judge Cahill noted that Chauvin had abused his position of trust and authority, and that his actions showed particular cruelty. The impact of the trial was enormous. George Floyd's death and Chauvin's conviction sparked a global conversation about policing, race, and justice. In the United States, it led to calls for police reform, including changes to use of force policies, the banning of chokeholds, and demands for greater accountability. The Black Lives Matter movement, which had started years earlier, grew stronger than ever. But the case also left deep divisions. Some argued the verdict was long overdue justice. Others felt it was not enough to change a system plagued by systemic issues. Politicians debated reforms, activists continued to march, and families of other victims hoped this case would lead to broader change. George Floyd's name became a symbol, not only of one man's tragic death, but of a movement demanding justice and equality. Murals of Floyd appeared in cities around the world, from Minneapolis to Berlin to Nairobi. His face, his story, and his final words, "I can't breathe," became rallying cries for millions. Even today, the case of Derek Chauvin and George Floyd continues to resonate. It is a reminder of the power of ordinary citizens, like a teenager with a phone camera, to hold the powerful accountable. It is also a reminder of the long journey ahead in achieving true justice and equality. In the end, the trial of Derek Chauvin was not just about one officer or one victim. It was about the larger question of whether America could confront its own history and present of racial injustice. The verdict brought relief to many, but it also raised the question, what comes next? For now, the case of George Floyd remains one of the defining moments of the 21st century, a moment when the world stopped to watch justice unfold in a courtroom in Minneapolis.